The distance between Washington, D.C. and Tehran is roughly 6,500 miles. Across oceans, mountains, and deserts, two rival states operate in a state of perpetual, carefully managed friction. When diplomats sit down to negotiate a nuclear arms treaty with a nation of nearly 90 million people, it requires years of back-channel talks, intense political risk, and incredibly complex legal drafting. The goal is to build a framework both sides can tolerate. Once those signatures hit the paper, the immediate tension drops. The rules are locked in. The boundaries are drawn. The expectation is that the crisis is over because a mutual understanding has been reached. But ink doesn't stop uranium enrichment. A signature on a multinational accord offers zero practical leverage if a state decides, a year or two later, to simply ignore the rules they agree to. This split-screen model illustrates the core difference between domestic and international law. Within the borders of a country, laws work because they are backed by force. If you break a contract, the police step in, a judge issues a ruling, and you pay a penalty. Between nations, that enforcement mechanism doesn't exist. It is a structural vacuum. As the rhetoric out of Washington made clear during the breakdown of the Iran deal, there was, quote, nothing enforceable in the deal itself. You can apply sanctions or restrict trade, but a sovereign state controls its own territory. It recognizes no higher domestic authority. If its leaders decide the economic pain is worth the strategic gain, standard penalties fail, which leaves an occupying power or a superpower rival with a distinct problem. If you cannot dial 911 on an international stage, and you cannot force a foreign leader into handcuffs, how do you actually guarantee they follow the rules? The response from the U.S. executive branch was exceptionally blunt. They publicly ridiculed the concept of legal recourse, asking aloud, "Am I going to say I'm going to take you to court? Let me just sue you?" International tribunals, like the court in The Hague, operate on consent and consensus. Proceedings take years, relying on volumes of paperwork and debate. That makes them entirely inadequate for halting an active nuclear program or stopping an immediate military maneuver. While the legal route is mired in delays, the alternative is already deployed. Thousands of troops, mechanized units, and heavy armor sit stationed at bases across the region, projecting immediate, tangible hard power. Laughing at the idea of a lawsuit serves a very specific strategic purpose. It tells the opposing government that the U.S. has bypassed the bureaucratic safety nets. The traditional rules of engagement are suspended. By pulling the option of the courtroom off the table, the dispute is dragged out of the realm of international law and dropped squarely onto a foundation of raw military leverage. This scale illustrates absolute deterrence. When a rival nation considers breaking a treaty, they calculate, does the benefit of cheating outweigh the punishment? The U.S. policy, warning they will bomb the hell out of you, short-circuits that math. A measured penalty is replaced with guaranteed destruction. To make a threat of that magnitude believable, a nation has to physically demonstrate the capacity to carry out. Long-range strategic bombers, capable of bypassing radar and delivering massive payloads, serve as the physical receipt for the verbal promise. Capability is only half the equation, the other half is intent. The rhetoric specifically included the phrase, "I don't want to do that," signaling that while a strike might be politically undesirable, the executive branch is fully prepared to authorize it anyway. When there is no judge to enforce a contract, peace holds only if the promised retaliation is incredibly disproportionate to the crime, and the adversary believes you will actually pull the trigger. Stripping away legal mediation changes the nature of the agreement entirely. What was a static, documented understanding becomes a deeply unstable, minute-by-minute standoff. The target state cannot afford to ignore an existential threat. They respond by accelerating their own military readiness, mobilizing forces, and operating in a heightened state of alert to counter the pressure. This timeline tracks a minor treaty violation in this environment. With both sides locked in a military posture, a slight misinterpretation of a centrifuge operation bypasses standard diplomacy. It triggers a massive escalation spike and is treated as an act of war. Without the safety net of intermediary dispute mechanisms, the fuse is incredibly short. The slightest perceived violation risks igniting a regional conflict. We are left looking at the stark realities of superpower diplomacy. Treaties ultimately offer a choice between an unenforceable piece of paper and compliance secured entirely through the threat of extreme violence. By rejecting the slow climb of escalation ladders and dismissing international courts, the United States relies on a simple truth. Ultimate geopolitical leverage is derived strictly from military capability. At the absolute peak of global statecraft, stability is not rooted in mutual trust. It is not anchored in international law. It is maintained strictly by the credible, ever-present shadow of mutual destruction.